Welcome to You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. It's time to make our way across the universe and talk all things John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Charles, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. Looking forward to this conversation and welcome along.
Thank you for having me.
I couldn't resist. And we were just talking before we began recording. And as I was saying to you then, it really does seem like you've lived this incredible Beatles dream life outside of your normal, I guess, 9 to 5 and the other things that you're doing. Yeah. I'm hoping we can cover as much of that as we can in the time we've got together.
We've got 5 hours, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well played. Good. Before we kind of peel back the layers of your story, as fascinating as it is, can we go back in time? Do you remember when the Beatles first hit you and why that mattered? I'm sure you've been asked, but I'm always curious to find that out.
Like my first memory in life was seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I was this little pipsqueak living in Bronx in New York. And we would watch Ed Sullivan every week because I loved, there was a puppet called Topo Gigio. This little puppet, and he'd say, good night, Eddie, kiss me good night. And that would make my night. This little kid, all I wanted to see was this silly, puppet mouth. And then this night, it was just like, the stars all aligned for me and for the rest of the world, because when Close Your Eyes, that was it. My life was changed with those. Now, I'd heard them on the radio, growing up in New York, exposed to all these great AM radio stations. But, they were 3D for me. They were outside of that little transistor radio. I'm hearing stuff that I'm loving even more than the Four Seasons and more than the Motown and all that. But until I got the visual and it all came together, that I do remember it and I'll never forget it. And it's when people ask, that's it. That changed my life.
Yeah, it's such a unique story. It's hard for, I guess, people the further we get down the road in history to probably fully appreciate the lightning bolt that night was out of the US that radiates around the world and effectively gives birth to musicians that are going to come down the line, from Petty and onward. I mean, the list is endless. It's kind of hard to imagine now what it must have felt like being in the US at that time, not long after Kennedy has gone. Everything's maybe in a state of flux. And I read once and I thought this is probably as close as I can understand it, that it looked like aliens had landed and taken over the airwaves. I mean, did you have a sense of what the hell is this?
Good aliens, of course.
Yeah.
So for 3 years, I did a radio show called the Monkees Interview Show. I'm a big Monkees guy. I love the Monkees. They're like second to the Beatles for me. And I would do so many people who were musicians, and you touched upon it. It's crazy how many people picked up guitars, started playing drums. I mean, the impact that had, you just can't even, it's immeasurable. But I didn't have musical talent. I was not able to pick up a guitar and play bass. My fingers didn't move the way a musician's is supposed to, and I didn't have the ear for it. So I'm thinking, well, can I find a different way to make this music, make the Beatles part of my life, and literally every possible way aside from that.
Yeah, and I guess that's a great segue into moving into some of that journey. I'd like to go back to the 1970s when you were pioneering. You were right there at the tip of the spear in terms of Beatles festival building, which is to this day has become its own thing. But back then, that wasn't the case necessarily. What was the world like for you post-Beatles, where there was perhaps this driving need to do something?
Well, first of all, I was one of the sillier humans on this planet, one of the crazier fans, because when the split came and, we're heading into the 70s, I'm thinking, wait a second, it's not so bad. We're going to get 4 albums instead of 1. And as someone who loved, to just vacuum in every possible song, getting 4 different solo albums seemed like not such a bad idea. But of course, in retrospect, around that time, mid 70s, the Beatles were still possible. They were still going to someday, reunite. We had them. They were still all alive, and it wasn't far removed from the split. But what was happening is There was a Broadway show called Beatlemania. All of a sudden, tribute bands like Rain, there's bands coming out and doing this stuff so that there's a whole new like fandom happening. And while that's happening, fanzines are coming out and they're almost professional but not quite, and fans are putting them out, and they're in Australia and they're in Japan and they're in the US and England, and I'm subscribing to every one of them. You know, in those days, it wasn't a $50 subscription for a year. It was like $5 plus send some postage stamps.
That's correct.
Send it. That was great.
Yeah.
And I would, do that to every possible fanzine I could find. Well, around 77, 78 here, all of a sudden there's Beatle conventions. There's the Magical History Tour, Magical Mystery Tour in Boston, put on by Joe Pope. And I would say that 74 was the first one. And then Beatle Fest is starting in New York, and that's around 75, 76, a year or so right after Boston. And I'm this naive, teenager thinking, well, I'll put on a Beatles convention in New Haven, Connecticut, where I'm living now.
Yeah.
And sometimes, when you're naive, it's a plus, because if I knew what went into it and I analyzed it and I had, a professional business sense, I would never have done this. But I jumped in full force, lost a lot of money, but was very persistent and stuck with it. And I think what I was different than anyone else in the world was, if someone was producing Beatle conventions, they were a Beatle convention producer. If they were putting out a fanzine, I umbrellaed it. I did a portfolio. So I'm doing the Beatle conventions, not just in Connecticut, but wherever anybody wants one. I'm coming out and flying out, Miami and Cleveland and all these cool places. But I'm also publishing Good Day Sunshine, which is a Beatles magazine, 20 years putting that out, and packaging tours for Beatle fans to go to London and Liverpool. So I'm a little more entrepreneurish than most people in that I'm spreading out, and each thing is feeding off the other. So if someone goes on the Beatles tour, they're subscribing to the magazine. If they love the magazine, they want to come on their tour. They want to come to my convention. They come to convention, I hand them a card, here, you got to come on the tour. It's nonstop. One thing helping the other, networking, before we use the word networking.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of ahead of my time with that, but that's how I really established myself as, this Beatles person beyond just a fan and not just any one of those niches.
Where did that spirit come from for you? Because it's not like you're working. Yes, you can see there's fests, you can see that there's fanzines popping out, but where does this inspiration come from without mentorship to go, hey, you know what? I can bespoke all of this and really do something unique here. And that seems to have informed a lot of your life when I kind of do my research. But where did that come from, that spirit in you? Almost forgetting that it's Beatles. But
That's a great question. No one's asked me this. Michael, this is I had to be mom and dad because they were so encouraging. I was the only child. We were like a team. Growing up, we would watch movies together and television together and radio together. If they went to bed at midnight, I went to bed at midnight, and they really encouraged everything that I did. And I think, when you have that kind of encouragement, that there's nothing you can't, you're not going to fail. Just do it. Make sure it's great. It was that combined with everything I did as if I was on the other side of it. How I would want someone to host a Beatles tour to Liverpool and what I would want from that tour. In the convention, I always try to get the best guests. I try to get the best bands. I would want it in a hotel that was, where they wouldn't have to pay a fortune for the rooms. I would always say, if I was attending it, how I would want it to be. And when I put out Good Day Sunshine, there was other Beatle fanzines at the time. The biggest, and it's still going on now, is called Beatle Fan.
Yeah.
With,
Bill King,
with
is it?
Bill King,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy, dear friend, and it's the best. It's always been the New York Times of Beatle fanzines. But I was okay being, and this is an American comparison, I was always okay being the Daily News or the New York Post of his New York Times, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't mind. I'd rather have more personality in what I was doing and throw in puns and be a little sillier and more fun and more personal than hardcore news, 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 news. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of what I did, and I don't know if you see it, but I'm hyper. I have a lot of energy, and
It's great.
I think it comes across here, but hopefully in everything I do, whether it's entertaining at an event, whether it's putting out a book, whether it's the fanzines or hosting. I host all the tours myself. I make sure everyone has the best
Mm.
time, and I think that people feed off the energy. It's always on that high level of fun and let's go, let's what are we doing next? And the other thing is, it's rare for me to ever say no. Any opportunities that were presented, I would say yes and then figure it out.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that. We're probably deviating a little bit here, but I'm a very big believer in that idea of just say yes. And the number of people that I've spoken to over the years, even outside of talking Beatles, but people that have achieved things beyond their immediate expectations, there's these commonalities. I just said yes, and then I waited to see if I could figure it out and navigate through. And I try and encourage my kids that too. Again, we're diving a little deeper here beyond Beatles, but life is so short and there's no time for being fear-filled, and you almost do have to adopt this default fearlessness and frequency of energy that you clearly have and have sustained for years to say that while I'm here, I'm going to live big and I'm going to see what happens. Because if I take an opportunity, there's going to be an outcome, regardless of good, bad, or indifferent. If I just say yes, I'm guaranteed something. Let's see what that is.
And luckily, it's mostly been good. And there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend.
See, now you eased into that. When I was a kid, when I was growing up in here in Australia, being a Beatles fan in 1975, and then 1977 when I'm sort of getting up there, I was born in '69. You were always this odd kid out, By the time I was 9, I had the catalogue, and I just remember, as it was for the first generation, turning over the albums and wondering what's that going to sound like. I don't even know I've got no reference. It's all new. It's not history for me. It's all new. And I remember then, as I went into the 80s, discovering that there were these things called fanzines, and it was across the pond. And I was aware then of Good Day Sunshine, aware of Beatle Fan. I think in Australia we had Beatles Beat that was being produced by a fellow called Graham at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And getting Beatles information, particularly pre John's passing, getting anything was really difficult. I would cut photos out of the newspaper and articles, and I'd try to collect everything just to see them in these different eras. And those fanzines were really valuable, and it's you can't undervalue. I guess in almost every genre of music they've played a role, but for Beatles fans, and Good Day Sunshine I was well aware of as a young man, being right up there. Loved the tone and the visual of all of it. You must be proud looking back on all that there was an importance there in reaching fans around the world and keeping them connected in lieu of having the opportunity like we do now to get and see so much.
Course. I mean, when I started the fanzine, it was out of necessity, because when you start doing these, when you become this Beatles person and you're doing you're subscribed to other fanzines and you start to do conventions, there's no computer, there's no database, there's no internet. So you're handwriting letters to people to answer their questions. And it's the same questions from 15 people. All right, well, that's, 15 stamps, 15 letters, seal it, mail it. I'd rather put it in one magazine and answer these questions as my front page of my letter. Yeah, here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing. Come join us, blah, blah. So the magazine became my personal newsletter. And then it grew to this 80, 100-page monster every other month, that filled that void exactly. And it was mostly after John passed that there was so much news. People would say, wait, and they'd interview me, in the 80s or 90s, and like, how do you have enough material? The Beatles haven't been together and 15 years or 20 years, whatever they're saying. How have you had, do you have enough material? I go, I have too much material. I could do 200 pages if I want to do everything about McCartney's releases and everything, but we were very fortunate because we had a nice team of contributors who would send in. One would do an article on collecting every other month. One would do one on traveling. One would do on the concert scene. All this. So I had, it wasn't just me. The hardest part was gathering it, retyping it because it was typewriter stuff. We didn't even have word processors then.
Yeah.
And then laying out the photos physically, pasting it with rubber cement so that the page looked right. It was very scary. Of all the things I did, Michael, that was probably the hardest, putting out the magazine on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It never didn't come out. And then once a year we would surprise the fans. I got this from the guy Joe Pope, who used to put out flexi discs when he put out Strawberry Fields, the fanzine. So we did a cassette issue once a year. And now, because I'm connected with all these great, Beatle people who are coming as guests to my conventions, or I'm meeting them and hanging with them in Liverpool on my tours, they're giving me great audio. So that once a year, I'm putting out an amazing collector's item, which the people are getting. So Good Day Sunshine, very, very special. People talk about it so fondly. And it's, I'll do a convention or something, or someone will come on a tour now and they'll go, I used to get Good Day Sunshine from such and such record store. And I never knew there was a Charles Rosenay, or if that was a real human, or what the deal was and all that. So it's great. It's really a great feeling.
Yeah, man, that's so cool. You've got an endless list of interactions and experiences with the inner circle of the Beatles universe, which is really amazing. I'd like to, and I'm sure we could just spend an hour talking about that aspect of your life, but who remains someone that had a real impact on you through meeting them, maybe beyond your expectations, and why that was the case?
Yeah, it's two gals come to mind. One is Linda, Paul's wife. And we met backstage so many times, and she would say, "Oh wait, Charles, you're from," and I'd say Bronx originally, now Connecticut. And the running joke would well, I was Scarsdale, so I was right in the middle. And if you get a map, you'll understand what I'm saying. I'm originally New York, and now Connecticut, but where she lived was right in the middle. And she'd always say, "Charles, we get Good Day Sunshine. Paul and I love it. Thank you so
Huh.
much." And right,
Yeah.
right. And the other gal was Cynthia Lennon,
Mm.
was just sweetheart, and came to so many of my conventions. So those two come to mind first. As far as putting myself on the map, I think Pete Best was a real vital figure in my whole Beatledom, because he came to my convention after we met. I met him and his mom Mona in Liverpool at the Casbah. We hit it off. We had a dance party. Pete came to so many of my conventions through the years in Connecticut, Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia, wherever I say, "Pete, you're flying back." "Oh, yes, of course, whatever you need, Charles." And to the point, I mean, I've done a few books. I did a Beatles book, a book on horror movies, and he was always there for me with a list, with a contribution. And I can go on. By saying
Yeah.
those three, I'm really leaving out a lot who are very important. But those three come to mind right.
And if you don't mind, could I ask you, if we were talking Pete, for example, what was your sense of Pete in the time that you spent with him as a man? I'm always interested in that, going beyond that veil of celebrity. They often say don't meet your heroes, but I often wonder what it must be like when you meet a hero and they relax with you. Do you get a
Yeah.
sense of their real character? And did you get that with Pete? Did you get a sense of who he might be?
Yes, because I could always tease him. I would do the interviews at all my conventions because I wanted my personality to be part of it. And Pete would tell the story about the thing, which
Yes.
is which would be part of his Hamburg existence with the guys, and I would force it out of him because, "Oh no, we're not doing that." And every time he would tell it, it would be embellished more and all that, to the point that 20 years or whatever passed, and he was doing an interview with his brother Rogue at the Liverpool Beatles Museum, and Rogue says, "Are there any questions?" And I go, "Pete, tell us about the thing."
Yeah.
And I did it in that voice. And he goes, "Wait, is Charles Rosenay here?"
That's great. That's great.
So we had, that kind of connection. After the conventions, we would go out, to a bar, to a restaurant, and once for some reason, I don't know what happened, almost got into a fight. And I know that if I didn't calm him down, he would have kicked three arses right on the spot. And I was
Wow.
like, wow, that's a sign of Pete that I'd never recognized before. Yeah, but you come from a tough neighborhood.
Yeah.
You've got that in you somewhere, but never with a fan, never at a convention, the sweetest, most humblest guy. And it's good because I think, it took a long time to be comfortable with yourself and understand that,
Mm.
world sometimes does play you, that terrible deck of cards, but you have to overcome it, and he overcame it, and he got, fortunately, a nice payout with the original anthology, and
Mm.
now his family owns the best museum on the Beatles in the world. In the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Casbah, is now it's a B&B, and it's a tourist so it's fortunately the best family has thrived and made the best of everything, so thank God for him. Yeah,
Yeah,
good on him.
beautifully said. I remember being in the audience at the Sydney Opera House years ago to hear Yoko speak. There was a retrospective of her work in Sydney, and I was maybe 3 rows back, and I didn't know what to expect. She came out, she opened with like a 10-minute improvisational vocal piece, which was crazy, but at the same time, electric. It was incredible. And I didn't expect what happened. The more I listened to her speak, even though I had no direct contact, but the more I was in her proximity, I started to find myself seeing this relaxed charm, and and she was also beautiful in her own way too. And I thought, oh, when you're in the company of this person, I started to get, I imagined what I think John must have seen. She was funny. She had a lightness of touch. I'm sure there's tenacity and everything else underneath, but we're all layered. But I thought, oh, she seems really charming when she seems to relax, and there's a lightness in her. I'm curious, people speak very highly about what Sin was like as a person too. When you were around someone like Cynthia, did you get a sense also of the qualities that perhaps John loved in her before things went as they went?
Absolutely. There was such a beautiful calm to her. She was beautiful inside and out. And you knew how much, she was a great mom
Mm,
to Julie. And you felt that she would have been your great mom too. She was a little older at the time. But you also felt that she was hot. She was hot, but yet a mom, if I can say that, you know what I mean? She kept such a coolness about her.
yeah.
Now, the best Yoko story was when she came to she had a theater event where she did an art show with all the Bag One stuff. And Sean was probably, I don't know, 6 years old, 7 years, whatever. And I was part of the ambassadors to take care of the Yoko Ono circle, and I brought a copy of Good Day Sunshine that had Yoko on the cover. Now, no fanzines would ever put Yoko on the cover
Yeah.
days, but it was the one and only issue. And I showed it to Sean, literally hung out with Sean for over an hour, babysitting him and taking care of him, and him looking at the magazine and talking with him. So my best Yoko story is not of hanging with her, but hanging with Sean,
Yeah.
thanks to her coming to an event.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and when we
Yeah.
and when Good Day Sunshine was when it was coming out every year, I would send her. I'd try to send copies to Ringo, to Paul, to George, and to John. I
Yeah.
mean Yoko eventually. And whenever Christmas came around, I would always get a signed Christmas card from Yoko while Good Day Sunshine was still in operation.
Wow.
So that goes a long way. That says a lot.
Yeah, man, that's just amazing. And you were talking about sin before. I hear Julian Lennon speak to this day, and I see how he carries himself and projects himself into the world. And I often think to myself, that woman did an incredible job with that man, the way that he's carried himself his entire life. That's
Yes.
there's obviously a little John there, but there's a whole lot of Cynthia that should be taking credit for that.
Absolutely. And he's, people say, why don't you do, I don't do Beatle conventions anymore. I do it's called the Fab Four Music Festival, and it's all bands. And if I can get a guest, fine. If I get some vendors, fine. But it's all about the music. I want, future generations. I want parents and grandparents to bring their kids. But everyone always said, well, why don't you do conventions anymore? And I go, well, there's not really any guests that I could bring that haven't been at a show.
Yeah.
And then of course, Julian will always come to mind and the kids come to mind, but that's not something that's even part of their, universe. They know it, they live it, they breathe it's DNA with them, but
Yes,
they're not going to go to a convention and say, answer questions about their dad. It's
of
not going to
course.
happen.
Yeah.
For years, George Martin was the get that I always wanted, and
Yeah.
we had him signed to do a cruise. And he said, you know what? I'm going to back out, Charles, because my hearing is really bad. And if the fans come up to me on board or while the ship is, and they ask me a question, I'm going to be embarrassed if I can't hear them. So
Mm,
the greatest ears, all you need is ears, right? George
yes.
Martin, uh, had hearing troubles as he got older, and so I only thought of that because I mentioned the why I don't do conventions anymore. Why Julia would have been my all-time get,
Yeah.
but George Martin was up there too.
I think to myself, just one of your stories is a life-changing pinch me. You have multiples. They just keep coming. I saw a great photograph just recently of you with Paul.
Yeah.
And can you take us through that meeting and what that experience was like? Because I'm sure it's something that most people would dream of.
Well, I met him quite a few times, so I don't
Sure.
know. I'm gonna tell you the first one. The first time, my friend, because
Uh,
there was a guy in Liverpool named Sam Leach.
mhm.
Sam was one of the early promoters. He didn't book them at the Cavern. That was all set, but he'd book them to the Tower Ballroom in Brighton. He would book them around the Merseyside, yes? And Sam was a sweetheart of a guy. We really hit it off, but he had a speech impediment, and I love telling this story because he had a very thick Scouse accent. He's from Liverpool, and he was a little older than the others, but he also talks like this. He had that little bit of an impediment. We're not
Sure.
laughing, are we? No.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
so
hear you. I hear you.
I would visit, and we'd always have great things. And Sam said, Charles, I'm translating it because if I said it how he said it, you wouldn't understand. And he said, Charles, bring me over. I want to be a guest at your convention. And I'm thinking, well, we've had Alan Williams, who was the Beatles' first manager. We've had all these people from England, but no one's going to understand him. And this is a concern. And I'm thinking, all right, Sam, I will bring you over when you write a book.
Hmm.
Great. Within 3 months, he had written Follow the Mersey Beat Road. He finished a beautiful book, which was really good. And he's like, Charles, he said, Charles, will you now bring me over? I said, yeah, of course, I will. But just know that when I bring you on stage and I do your interview, that I will repeat every question that's asked and I will repeat every answer that you're saying because sometimes the acoustics aren't good in an auditorium or in a hotel. This is my way of making him realize. And he said, I don't care. Just have me come over. Came over. It was a great guest. He said, Charles, thank you for doing this. In exchange, when Paul McCartney tours, I'm going to get you backstage to meet him. I didn't take it seriously because Paul had been busted in Japan and he hadn't done a tour and we never thought he was going
Mm.
to tour. Well, of course, here we are. And it's late 89. And he's announcing that he's doing a European concert tour. And I'm doing Beatle tours now for 6 years. So every summer, I take people to London and Liverpool on the Magical History Tour. I'm thinking, look, this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity. We don't know if Paul's going to be touring all these years that he is now.
Yeah.
I do a tour to go see him in Birmingham at the NEC. That's part of the tour. We spend 3 days in London, New Year's Eve, and we spend 3 days in Liverpool, plus this trip to see Paul. I was able to get 40 tickets, sold it out right away. Sam calls and says, Charles, you know, Paul is touring. I go, yes, I'm coming to Birmingham. He goes, oh, I'm going to that show. Remember, I promised you could meet him. We'll go backstage there. Like it's like, you know, like something you do every other day. I go, okay, Sam, sure. Sounds great. He goes, no, this is really serious. And sure enough, we'll cut to the room about the size of maybe your collector's room, and
Yeah.
my den here maybe holds about 40, 50 people. And Paul is 20 minutes away from the concert. And the room is filled with Mike McCartney, Vera, Chuck, and Dave. It's like literally everyone who's from his childhood, from his family, everyone is in this room waiting to congratulate him before he goes on stage. And I'm like, Sam, it's 8 o'clock. There's no way he's coming out and seeing us. He goes, don't worry. And he's got his daughter with him, Samantha. And she's like, Daddy, he's not coming. He's not. I go, if your dad says he's coming, he's coming. Sure enough, 5 minutes after 8, he walks in this door. I go, Sam, how's it possible? He goes, well, the concert starts at 8, but Paul doesn't go on till 8:30. There's an opening DJ. Go, oh, okay. And he literally makes his way through this room. And I'm like, my heart is like, now, I'd met the Monkees in '86.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought, that's it. I've met my other favorites. I'm good. I'm never going to meet a Beatle. Well, I got to tell you, he comes over to us and he sees Sam Leach and he hugs him. And they're like, they haven't seen each other in years. And Paul actually understands what he says. And they're and they're embracing. And he picks up this daughter and Sammy. This is the other Sammy. And they're hugging and, you know, they're talking. And finally, Paul goes, well, so who's this bloke? Meaning me. Why am I standing there? I'm taking all the pictures. And Sam goes, oh, this is my mate, my good friend from the US, Charles Rosenay. He publishes Good Day Sunshine. And Paul goes, oh, good title. And then
Yeah.
and he goes, and Charles produces the Beatles conventions in the US. I've gone over, they're great. Paul goes, oh, very cool. And then he goes, and Charles also packages these Beatle tours to England for Beatle fans. And Paul goes, when do I get my royalties? And I'm
Wow.
saying that, it broke the, I was a nervous wreck. I was just melting. And him saying that was like, wow, he's human and he's funny. And this was amazing. And we took pictures together, and I got to meet him a bunch of times thereafter. But it was always, you know, Linda, who was very special and would remember. It's really funny because we did a similar thing with George Harrison. We went to see him in Japan as part of our tours. Some of us got to meet him at the airport. Ringo, I met many times at like press conferences and those kind of things. But John, of course, never had a chance to meet, and very blessed. And had I not taken all the journeys and the directions and the paths that I took to be part of, you know, this Beatles universe, obviously I would have been a fan who maybe saw them in concert, you know, maybe somehow. But being on the inside, I was very blessed to have had these amazing opportunities.
Yeah, and you articulate those stories in such an incredible way. It's like being there with you and getting that same sensation through my body as I'm imagining that's me. I mean, what an incredible journey. What is it about Liverpool for you with Magical History Tour? That seems to be a big part of your life to this very day. And, you know, you were talking about the enthusiasm and the energy that you have for that still. What is it about that gives you the joy that it gives you? And where can people find out more about that and tune into that?
Please, thank you. So, growing up, you would see an article on the Beatles, you'd clip it, right? You'd put it in a scrapbook
Yeah.
or put it in a pile. If it said Liverpool, the big ships are coming in, if it's having an anniversary, I would cut it out. To me, Liverpool and the Beatles were synonymous. And, you know, to me, I don't think I'll ever go there. You know, it's a different part of the world. I don't think I'm ever going to go to Liverpool. And it was my dream. This was the other holy land. And I said that, you know, if I could ever go there, I'll jump at the opportunity. And that opportunity presented itself in the early 80s when a travel agent said, Charles, you've got this Good Day Sunshine. You've got all these fans. You've got all these friends. Why don't you host Good Day Sunshine Magical Mystery Tour to Liverpool? And what did I tell him? Yes, of course. I just thought I'd get a free trip out of it and get to go to a place that I always dreamed about and, saw it. I always tell people you see it in the postcards, you hear about it in Penny Lane's, you hear it in the songs, you read about it in the books. Go there, live it. It'll be the ultimate Beatles experience. And I had that as a fan the first time, and then from subsequent years, and now we're 43 years later, I have the joy of bringing fans there and seeing it and living it through their faces the first time they get onto Liverpool soil. I always just say in those days, Liverpool is the people. They're
Huh.
gritty, funny, everything about it. And it's true. Once you go there, it's a different. You love the city. And London is fine. I call London the hors d'oeuvre, the appetizer. We go there for 3 days. Okay, we did what we had to. We did Abbey Road. We saw the Apple Bill, but then it's a whole week in Liverpool, and it's so magical. Yeah, we call it the Magical History Tour. Liverpooltours.com is the best place to read about it. We bring 30, 40 people every single year. They have the greatest time of their lives, and hopefully we'll be doing it for many years to come.
What's some of the best reactions you've seen from people? I was talking to Diane Glover from the Beatles story some time ago, and she was telling me it's not uncommon for people to come in and fall into tears. And a Beatle fan, a listener, knows what this feeling is, where it's not just about the music, it's not just about the story. There is something much deeper than that that fans understand. And she was saying that's one of the things she loves about the work is that you see people move to tears and they're not really sure why. I'm sure you've had those experiences with people. Could you share some of the things you've seen that have touched you?
It's funny. There's two places in the world where I cried and I didn't know that my tears were coming out. One was a holy place, a religious place, and one was the first time that Paul McCartney was on when I saw him on stage, and I didn't even realize. And someone looked at me, and, oh, that's so sweet, you're crying, and I go, I am, and the tears were flowing, and I didn't know it. And
Huh.
so I understand that reaction from the people because if they're 67 years old or 72 or whatever age, and this is all they've ever heard about in the songs and dreamt about possibly going, and now hopefully I was a part of making that happen, and they're now in the place that they've only imagined, walking in the footsteps of the Beatles, and the tears are flowing. It's natural. It's not a surprise to see that anymore. We had a gal who came with her husband, and her husband macho, this is good, but I can be at the soccer match, one of those. And he comes there, and I see him on all fours, and I goes, "You all right?" He was kissing the ground. I was
Wow.
like, wow, that's a reaction I'd never seen. And he got up and it wasn't planned. That was like his first reaction to Liverpool was wow. And so that's a good question. No one's asked me that. And that stuck out as one of the oh my gosh moments from the Beatle tours.
One of the things that I think is great about you, just in terms of living a full life, you don't fit into a box. There are so many elements to you as a person and your story, far from the least of which is that your Beatles authorship and your work as a writer. Uh,
Yes.
do you mind just telling us a little bit about that aspect of your life?
Yeah, very proud. So after Good Day Sunshine ended, it was about 20 years. My parents were getting on in age, had to take care of them, and I really couldn't take care of the magazine anymore. Someone took it over, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. And I said, when that was done, people, oh, great, now you can write your book. You can you can write about all your Liverpool adventures, or you can write about all the guests you interviewed, or you can do a compendium of all the Good Day Sunshine magazines. And I said, I am never writing a book. That's it. That's it. I did for 20 years. I was putting out a book every other month,
Yeah.
6 times a year. Good Day Sunshine to me, that was it. I'm done. And of course, COVID hit. Remember that COVID
Yeah.
thing, man? I couldn't do tours. I couldn't DJ, which is my main, vocation. I wasn't booking bands. Everything that I wasn't doing conventions, all the things I do, I couldn't do. I was going out of my mind. So I put out my first book, and it was the book of top 10 horror lists, and it had 9 chapters related to the Beatles. But my Beatle people were very upset. How dare you put out a book and not be the Beatles? So the follow-up, very similar, the book of top 10 Beatle lists, where 64 celebrities, a third of them Beatle people, a third of them rock musicians, a third of them just actors and actresses and all kind of celebrities, gave me their top 10 favorite Beatle themes. And it's not just their top songs, oh, She Loves You and Yesterday, it's reasons why. And so it took that. Every story got a photo, every story got a bio. And it's just, I'm so proud of this, because when I put it out, I said to myself, what hasn't been done?
Yes.
Every Beatle book's been written, right? Well, not every Beatle book, because this is so different than any others. And to a person, anyone who's picked it up and read it loves it. I keep using the words that I'm blessed, but everyone who goes on my tours, it's like 100% satisfaction. They used to come to the conventions, and I still get, Charles, why don't you do conventions anymore? They were the greatest. We miss Good Day Sunshine. So I'm just so lucky that all the things that I've done make people so happy, and the book fits that. And I've got another book coming out in 2027 that's Beatles related, and I'm not going to give away what it is, but it's, again, very different and very thematic. That's nothing ever been done before.
Wow. Okay. That sounds terrific. Where can people find the books?
Amazon, whether
Yeah.
it's Amazon Australia, Amazon UK,
Yeah.
Amazon US, is the best place. You get it. It's sent to you, no shipping if you have Amazon Prime. If they want a signed copy, I'm going to be at the Liverpool Convention in August. I do so many libraries stateside
Yeah.
where I do a presentation and then I sign afterwards. But the website is www.bookoftop10beatlelists.com. So you take off the word the, and
Yeah.
it's www.bookoftop10, the number 10, Beatles and I'll gladly send an autographed or a signed copy with a personal note.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And am I right? The cover art layout looks terrific. Am I seeing Shannon McDonald work there?
Whoa, very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shannon has done so much for me through the years. And when I said that I was putting together a book, we agreed no one else can do it. And I think some of these images might have actually appeared on either her book
Yeah.
or on Angie McCartney's book. But yeah, I wanted it. If you look at the two, you get why. I wanted
Ah,
it
yeah.
similar. In this one, it's all the monsters and the creatures and the horror things. So I wanted the same layout, but I wanted early Beatles, middle Beatles,
Yep.
later Beatles. Yeah, Shannon, of course, the world's greatest, not just Beatles artist, but artist, period.
Yeah, incredible body of work. Incredible. Just as a sidebar, I've got to ask you, I'm just curious as a horror fan myself, your number one horror film of all time. What would be it? Could you call it?
That's, every time I did this, I would ask, what's your favorite horror for the top 10 list, or what's your favorite Beatles song?
Yeah,
And the response is, I have too many. It's so hard for me. I mean, if I ask you your favorite Beatles song, could you do it right now?
that's true. That's true.
All right. But
It,
all right. So having said that, with both those books, I've put them to bed, finished them, sent them to the publisher, and the publisher said, "Where's your chapter?" And I'm like, no, no. And I had to come up with my, list of top 10 Beatles, and it's all very
right.
thematic, just songs, and it was more memories than actual songs. And for the
Yes.
horror one, it was not just, I was very cheeky. As you know, I do some acting, so I put my favorite top 10 horror roles that I was in. So that was a cheeky way of answering it. But if it went to my head, I would have to say The Exorcist.
Yeah, okay. Well, for me,
Yeah.
I go back to John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, phenomenal! Right, can't
Yeah,
argue with it. Yeah,
yeah.
and but if you go number 2 and 3, it'll be stuff like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein,
Yes.
or something obscure like Phantom of the Paradise from Paul Williams. Really weird stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me when it comes to Beatles. I often think of them in terms of, for me, my favorite album would be Abbey Road. I think their most important album is Revolver. I think their greatest album is the White Album. So I can kind of move between where I think those works sit in terms of importance. I don't think it's possible to say it's got to be this and it's got to be that. And I think, as you said before, you attach memory to the music too, and that helps inform almost a bias, doesn't it?
And that's fine, because that's what favorites is. It's all biased. So yeah, absolutely. Your favorite album may not be their favorite album, and they're going to say, well, this is more important because, well, that's fine. We want that, it keeps it all interesting. But as long as it's the Beatles are the favorite, I don't care which they're picking.
There you go. I love the fact that you've been able to take this passion and turn it into a life, and that you've reached and continuing to reach fans around the world. It's no small thing. And to listen to you speak, even beyond Beatles, and it's only because it's been fresh in my mind this week, this idea of living a life free of self-doubt and seeing what happens if I say yes, there's really something in that. And I think also when you look at the story of the Beatles, that's in there too. When you think of these guys coming together, it's almost like it's preordained, isn't it? It's you can't make it up and have it better than the real story that it is. But this fearlessness and this drive in them, and at the peak of their career, when they're making all the money and the world's at their feet, we're going to stop and do what? Become a studio band. Well, who's done that before? Nobody. Well, what makes you think this is going to work? Let's find out. When you get past everything else and just look at these big swings toward the fences, there's a real value in that story beyond just the obvious, isn't there?
Well, you're blowing my mind. I do a presentation with this Beatles scholar by the name of Kevin Soling, and we've just brought it out to libraries. We're premiering it in Liverpool at this year's Beatle Week convention, and it's called "The Birth, the Death, and the Rebirth of the Beatles." And some of the themes you just touched on are part of, the Beatles. They took their name off of albums. They distorted their faces. They did smocks of butchers, and then the ultimate, just a white album with nothing else.
Yep.
And all of this is part of a presentation that we do. So, wow, I can't believe you've hit on that. Yeah, amazing.
That's wonderful. And it's a story that, as you peel back layers, it seems to be never ending. There's just so much to it. And I think that's part of what keeps us doing this all these years later. What's next for you? You mentioned the book's coming up. You can't tell us much about it. And is there anything else on the calendar for this year? Could you tell us a bit? I know you did touch on it. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Liverpool and dates?
Sure. So August, again, bringing people on the Magical History Tour, where we go 3 days London. We spend an afternoon in Henley, George's home, and then continue on to Liverpool for a week. It's the Magical History Tour, liverpooltours.com. And there I will have all my books with me. I will be doing the presentation. And I just not too long ago put out a book on this other fun band called the Turtles, who I think are one of the most underrated, underappreciated bands. And we're so happy with the results of that I'm working with the same author, Mark Arnold, and we're putting out a book on the Monkees, and that's coming out in September. And I'm producing a Monkees convention this year in September, because their 60th anniversary, and I don't know if fans will be around for the 70th, so I got to do it now.
Charles Rosenay, you are in a class all of your own. I am already knowing now, this is one of my favorite conversations. It's been a real buzz to talk with you, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing out there. Thank you for being so sharing in this conversation, and I look forward to following you and your journey, and hopefully maybe crossing paths one day in the first person in Liverpool.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much for having me on and asking so many fun questions, because you steered me in all the places that I wanted to go and surprised me on some of the ones I wouldn't have thought I was going. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, sir, and talk again soon.
Cheers.